All right, everybody, welcome back to the best hour of their day. Fern here again. I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Matt Miller, and I'm kind of excited about this talk. This is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart just due to my family, quite frankly. But I do have a little beef with Matt. He is an Alabama fan. I'm an LSU fan. And next weekend, it's on. So I'll be honest with you, I never like playing the Tide at their home, but it is what it is, man. It is what it is.
It is
So,
what it is. I'm hoping Tua make a comeback.
yeah, he's not doing well. I mean, he's a great quarterback, but he's in the middle of a little bit of an injury, so I'm hoping that's going to work out to our advantage, and I'll take it. I don't care.
I hear you have a high trophy front runner, don't you?
If he's not the Heisman Trophy frontrunner, I don't know who is, to be frank with you, because he's been crushing it. I mean, Auburn was his worst game, and it wasn't a bad game. It just wasn't a ridiculous game like he's been having every weekend. So, yeah, I'm a Joe Burrow fan.
When Joe Burrow can run for touchdowns against that defense, you guys have a great team.
I mean, listen, we could go on and on about like the frustration I've had with the lack of good QBs at LSU for the past 2 decades, but we'll refrain that for another podcast. But anyway, so in the spirit of trying to provide value to the community, Matt and I are going to talk about some topics that are probably not necessarily on the top of people's minds, but Matt's background is in the mental health field, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Matt's got some other cool stuff going on. He and I have crossed paths at the games and some other networks, and then somebody like hit me up again a couple weeks ago and said you should get Matt on the show. So we set it up. Here we are. But he's working on. He's got some CEUs that are available for you guys that are trying to keep your credentials good for level 3, and we're going to dive into some stuff, but the big topic that we're going to kind of dive into once we get there is, with the shift to health, right? The idea here is that we're trying to work with the underserved, which is essentially what Coach Glassman has defined as the elderly and the obese. There are some pretty significant hurdles there with regard to the psychological space that a lot of people are in. You have to learn really how to manage objections from a coaching standpoint. So I think the mental health space has a lot to offer here. And my mom has been, a clinical and private practice social worker for like almost 40 years, dealing with a lot of scenarios. So I'm pretty intimately familiar with a lot of these things, and it's a big deal. So Matt, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on the show and giving me this access to this awesome community that's made the impact on me and my family. I didn't know this about your mom.
Yeah. She's my mom. She's been doing it. I mean, primarily she's been. I guess the bulk of her case work is probably a lot of marriage counseling, but over the years that's kind of fluctuated, and she did a lot of post-traumatic stress counseling after Katrina, because they're down there in Baton Rouge, and she saw tons and tons of people for years after that. So yeah, she's she's been doing this for a long time, and I've picked up some things from her over the years, obviously, because she's really good at it. But this is a skill set that probably most coaches are not, what I would say, like well equipped for, right, or with, if you will, is to have some of those hard conversations, and because they can be a little awkward. Like, I don't really know how else to say that, and they can be a little like super stressful for both parties if you don't know how to navigate those waters.
Absolutely. The that EU event for CrossFit coaches, thank goodness, headquarters approved it, is called The Art and Science of Uncomfortable Conversations. And definitely awkward, uncomfortable, necessary.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the CEUs there real quick. So the title, if anybody's trying to get CEUs for their continuing education for their level 3, the title of the course is ORS, the Art and Science of Uncomfortable Conversations. So talk to me a little bit about the course first, and then we're going to talk about some more practical things that like coaches can do like if, what my goal with you today is to, like, if somebody listens to this podcast and then somebody that falls into that demographic walks in the door immediately, is that they would be at least better equipped to have the conversation than before they listen to the podcast.
Absolutely. Definitely the purpose for me having the CEU event and stick my head out of what's really my professional swim lane, as you would say, is to first and foremost share a strategy, a technique, a tactic, call it what you will, a process. It's really, as Dr. William Miller would say, the guy that kind of created something we call motivational interviewing. It
Mm-hmm.
was really the way of being with someone, how to just really exist in time and place with someone. And Carl Rogers probably had the biggest influence. Dr. Carl Rogers, the great pioneer in counseling techniques, would say that being able to exhibit accurate empathy with people usually has the biggest impact on outcomes of counseling sessions, right? So if we take that skill set, let's say knowing how to have an uncomfortable, awkward conversation with someone 30 minutes before you start briefing as a CrossFit coach, let's say, knowing how to appropriately and effectively be with that person, I think it's only going to enhance our ability as CrossFit coaches and affiliates, and also participants, athletes, clients, whatever we call ourselves, members of the community, to be able to sit and be with folks. But definitely for coaches, this acronym OARS is really the way that we stay on task with this particular strategy. To exhibit accurate empathy requires, we know by studying counseling sessions, by literally videotaping and then critiquing the styles of counseling, that people who exhibit accurate empathy by asking open-ended questions. So instead of being directive, it's really comes across as non-directive. In essence, it's not my agenda, it's your agenda,
Yeah.
right? And so, we've heard this for years, be where the client is, right?
Mhm.
And if they're not ready to do a ring muscle up, do you need to be training them on a ring muscle up?
Well, from a coaching standpoint, no. We should probably start with a progression of some sort, and maybe, and again, meeting them where they're at. And so Jay and I did an episode on empathy a while back, and I actually got quite a bit of feedback on that. Like probably one of the most listened to episodes that we've done. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it, everybody. And we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about tonality, body language, facial expressions, like how you engage people. But what would you describe as accurate empathy? And I asked that because empathy can be this big, vague thing where it's just like, hey, have more empathy, which we would describe as just care more. But I don't know that does it justice. Like, what does that look like in real time?
I'm going to be a little bit more nerdy here,
No, that's
and
great.
I think it's necessary. And this will be part of the class too. And I can say that when we're talking about using OARS or something we call motivational interviewing, when we're being with someone so we can have accurate empathy, we're also juggling another kind of theory in the field of behavioral science, really in change psychology, the psychology of change. And that is something we call the trans-theoretical model of change. All right. Some people call it the stages of change. It may even
Mhm.
be called readiness to change. So, are you familiar with the stages?
If you told them to me, I could probably or if you start, I could probably piecemeal them together. But the short answer is no. I'm sure I've
Yeah.
seen them at some point, but haven't. But the author, I have that book I might have it here. But motivational interviewing. Who's the author for that again? For people who are interested in that, I forgot.
I'm almost positive that if it is really motivational interviewing, it's going to be William Miller. Howard Miller is the owner of CrossFit Huntsville, my affiliate.
Yeah.
William Miller from the University of New Mexico.
Okay. And there's another good one that's very similar to that book, which is called Coactive Coaching. So people can check that out too. But I do have that book. I don't know if it's here. It might be at my house, but I do have motivational interviewing in my possession.
Man, that stuff is so powerful. And motivational interviewing really is just another way of using a Rogerian approach in counseling sessions. But we know that as they've kind of studied and tested this approach on other populations, let's say, and not just like the original research that Dr. Miller did for motivational interviewing was with problem drinkers. All right. And so then he found that there was a usefulness in smoke cessation or helping people quit smoking. And this is where this other theory that we're also juggling while we're using ORs, let's say, asking open-ended questions, using affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing, we're also juggling and keeping really at the forefront of our mind that every person we meet is somewhere along these stages of change. Every single one of us are somewhere on one of these stages. The first stage that we talk about is called pre-contemplation. All right. And so a person with a pre-contemplative mindset, we say they're not ready. That's a good way to describe it. They literally don't think they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how you talk to someone, how you are able to be with someone, how you use ORs with someone who's not ready, that's really potent. How you talk to someone who is ready, we would call that person either in preparation, the stage of preparation, or the stage of action. You wouldn't talk to them the same way you talk to somebody who's in pre-contemplation. But most service organizations, whether you're an alcohol and drug rehab center, whether you are a fitness center, a CrossFit affiliate, in my opinion, these organizations are what we would call action-oriented type of facilities or organizations. We're already assuming that you're ready. When you walk through the door, we've got rigs bolted in the concrete. We're ready.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And we're assuming if you come in here and you go through the one-on-one or the onboarding class, you're ready. So being able to understand those nuances, I mean, you did my L1. You guys are in touch with scaling. No, we scale movement. We scale these things. We understand these points of performance and learn how to scale. Scaling how you talk to someone is really what this is about for me.
That is a skill that I just, truth be told, have never practiced, like, I guess intentionally, but it is something that I'm, particularly in the level 1 setting, because you interact with so many strangers, we'll call it, throughout the year, that you do pick it up over time. You do subtly understand the art of the tone of the way you say things, or literally the order of words that you use, and things like that can be the difference between this person acknowledging and accepting what you have to say or checking out for the rest of the weekend, right? And I know nothing about it other than I've probably developed some sort of skill set with regard to that over the years, purely out of necessity, because I have to connect with people over the weekend. And I'm thinking about the affiliate setting. So, like, let's go to these people who are in pre-contemplation. So, if you think about the number of people that come into the CrossFit gym, most of them it's a done deal. Like, that sale is done before they actually show up. Those are not the hard ones. The ones that are far more difficult are like if you're running 6-week challenges at your gym, or you're doing some sort of special where you're bringing in people who are kind of on the fence. They come in and, like, I'm envisioning like a very, like, specific subset of people, which is probably a little bit overweight. We ask them about their fitness. They're not really understanding that they're unhealthy. And if you ask them anything about their nutrition, they're in their mind, their nutrition is pretty good, you know. And full disclosure, I have really run into some road bumps in some of those conversations because I have no idea how to break through on some people like that. So for a coach who's dealing with that person sitting in front of them who's, you know, let's call it 80 pounds overweight, and they're telling you that they know how to eat, and you're in the midst of that conversation with your brain exploding, like how do you start to unpack that to have a productive conversation?
This is like the perfect, like this is like underhand softball toss. I love it. This
Well, listen, man, I do this a ton, and so I know how to tee these up.
I love. So here's what we're doing. The first thing is we begin with the end in mind. Thank you, Stephen Covey. And we're
Yep.
going to remember the purpose for us doing what we're doing. And so it's not checking a box off. It's, and here's another thing, and I say this to you in a loving and caring way because that's what you do, right?
Hey, everybody, I'm about to get some feedback on the podcast, so just take notes.
Seriously, I say somebody that really is paying attention and really cares about you as a coach. Like I saw you on Instagram yesterday doing like a performance evaluation or something.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what yesterday?
Yeah, it was a couple days ago on the best hour of their day Instagram handle. Correct.
Oh, so awesome. So you're sitting there and you're kind of talking to us about what you're looking for in the coach and all of this. Having somebody in your organization, at your gym, at your affiliate, who understands kind of what's going on, if they would say to you, hey, no client is hard, or they're all hard, but to differentiate a pre-contemplated person.
Well, when you say hard, what do you mean by that? Like,
If I were to say, man, you know, those conversations are harder, or dealing with
oh,
a,
got it.
yeah. So if we could immediately start working on our own psychology, but what I'm going to say is this ORS acronym is there for when we are kind of raw and frazzled and we've had a ton of emotional conversations. Maybe we've done too many groups that day, too many sessions. And it happens, you know, we're talking about real life here, running the gym, you're doing everything. And what I'm going to say is I meet a person who's 80 pounds overweight. I don't know what their perception is of overweight.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way I'm going to know is to ask them. And so am I going to ask them, what's your perception of obesity? I don't know. Do you think that that's even appropriate? But finding out what their perception is. Look, I had a guy bring his wife in here. You know, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a talk therapist. That's what I do. You know, every hour on the hour for a living.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in private practice here, and so I had a guy come in with his wife, and you know, he's trying to quit smoking. She scheduled the appointment. All right, so they're in there, they're in here, and over the months, you know, he's just not changed. We get into all kinds of other conversations, distracted away from the end thing, which was the guy needs to quit smoking. The doctors are telling him he's going to kill himself. It's already looking bad biologically, physically for him when he goes for his checkups. Eventually, their dog died. They don't have any kids. Their dog dies. What do you think the dog died from?
Probably secondary smoke inhalation.
Secondary smoke. The dog died lung cancer. The wife, what do you think she did as a response?
She probably went high and right, and I would say worst case scenario decided she was going to leave him, or she schedules this appointment with you.
Well, she definitely did that, but she cried. She cried. You know what he did? He went and bought another dog. what is your perception, right? What is your perception of your issue? So the way that we find that out is by asking open-ended questions, not yes or no questions. We know
Mm-hmm.
this addiction trick. When you ask open-ended questions of a person, they immediately get defensive.
Yeah. So, like an open-ended question, I'm trying to think of different tactics I've used over the years would be like, I've asked people something like, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? This is not necessarily open-ended, but it gives them an opportunity to kind of like, how would you rate your health on whatever scale you feel necessary? And and generally that gives me a pretty good idea of is their perception accurate or not, and allows me to frame the conversation a little bit more. If they come in and they say, I'm on the verge of dying based on these behaviors, then I'm like, okay, cool, we're there. But if they're like, I'm doing okay, now I know I'm in for a far longer, rougher road in order to get this person to look like anything that looks like coming around.
Absolutely. So definitely being creative with the types of open-ended questions. Like you said, you eventually find out, what kind of works best. And it may just be the fact that you deliver it better as time goes on. But open-ended questions are a really powerful way to find out, or to find your way into accurate empathy with people. And it doesn't have to be a really long conversation. The better we get at this thing, all right? So, I've talked to a couple of gyms around here who have hired me for like business related, coaching stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking with the coaches and we bring this up, I've kind of tested this out before I took the chance and send in the application to CrossFit headquarters. I tested it out with them, and one of the first responses was, how are we going to have time to have these conversations? And so I think there's, again, before we even start this, we need to know as a culture inside of your affiliate, are you guys more concerned about having back-to-back classes, or is there cushion in between? Now, you guys do an amazing job. I've learned so much about CrossFit, um, affiliate ownership and how to be a better coach and all that from your podcast. And I can't thank you guys enough for putting out so much content. But you know what that's like. Some people are trying to rush to the next class. Who is talking to the pre-contemplated person who still can't get a pull-up, but they're
Yeah.
still overweight? And do they think that you care?
Well, I think I'm very hesitant to ever buy off on the I don't have time excuse. You could always go back with a just rephrase it as it's not a priority thing, right? Like, um, the, in very few scenarios of people that I've met, and I know people that are far busier than any gym owner, like any gym owner, and it's usually a lack of organization, right? So let's just use that gym owner who is coaching back to back to back classes. Well, I mean, if you're the owner, you have the ability to set your schedule however you want. So my recommendation is don't set consults. If you teach the 3-4-5, don't schedule a consult for 5:15. At least give yourself some time to come down off of that. Maybe find it. And the other thing that we do is, in order to kind of wrap our brains around it, is we get at least a little bit of information on these people before they come in. So I kind of know what they're looking for. Some people are super open about it. Some people are not, but I can start to frame a little bit of what needs to happen in the conversation at that point, and prepare myself for this person is super scared, or they're have lost 80 pounds and they want to lose another 80 pounds. And now I'm like, okay, this is a substantial journey that we're on here. And so that's just stuff there that we've done, but you can work around that. But what would be an example for you if you had somebody who's coming in who's primarily coming to you and they say, hey, I want to lose weight? Like, what would open-ended question for somebody like that?
I like to start, especially if I don't have a lot of rapport with the person, if they're new, or I just haven't, coached them or done a counseling session with them yet. This OR acronym is it looks like, and some of our folks who are list makers and rule followers might think you have to follow it in a linear path, left, right.
Mm-hmm.
What I believe open-ended questions are a way of eliciting out of people
Yeah.
how they're thinking about stuff. But I want to tell you that A stands for affirmations.
Yep.
I'm going to brag on folks. If you've ever met Dennis Berry, my first head CrossFit coach here at CrossFit Huntsville back in the day when I first started, Dennis Berry was yelling my name when I stepped, my first foot landed outside of my car. When I would pull up and get out of my car, I could hear him yelling my name inside of the box. The
Mm-hmm.
guy had energy, and right off the bat, I'm feeling good about showing up. It's as if he is recognizing me just showing up.
Yep.
Bragging on folks for stuff that you think, hey, you're supposed to do that. You should be doing that. That mindset won't work with people who are caught in pre-contemplation or ambivalent about being there.
Well, that is something that a lot of newer coaches in general, and again, like I'm not saying I'm naturally gifted at this. I've just made the mistake more times than most. Is we project our own principles on other people, where we're just like, I don't understand how people could not do this, and that's just naive at best and super ignorant. I try to go the other way, which is like I try not to assume anything about anybody, and I try to assume, it sounds terrible, but I try to assume the worst, that they have
Yeah.
zero motivation. And one thing that I think has helped me is like actively seeking out the ability to tee up wins for people, even if it's just in conversation where they say, well, I'm trying to think of an example where somebody comes in, they say, well, we eat out, 5 times a week. And I said, well, are we eating at home the other 2? And they said, yeah, we cook at home and we do that. And I'm like, well, great. So we got 2 days in the books. Like, let's just try to make it 3 now. So I think like being like, and I find myself waiting, like really looking and kind of like waiting, like almost on pins and needles, like where's the first win that I can pull from this person in order to make them feel good about this. Because I think those people are incredibly delicate, and most of them, you have deal with it at much more extremes than I do, but most of them are kind of looking for an excuse to not do it.
I'm not sure if it was Coach Glassman that said this first, or if it just kind of has become part of the lexicon, but this tsunami that's heading towards us, well, from a mental health perspective, I definitely agree, number one. And I want to say, opening up and pivoting our approach as a community towards more of a health-oriented healthcare provider approach, if you will. And those are my words. I think that you guys as CrossFit coaches are healthcare providers, not sick care, but healthcare. But I would say the tsunami is a tsunami of ambivalence on the part of this new demographic, because when they're standing with the music pounding out of those speakers and the people are running around, I think that, in the energy of time, the pheromones are flying, you're going to have somebody who's literally at that moment weighing and measuring the pros and cons of whether they want to come back or not. And so knowing how to deal with ambivalence, it's the person who's been there for 2 years, all right, and they're not, all of a sudden they've plateaued, out of their mind on everything. What kind of conversation am I going to have with them? Well, open-ended questions are great. Affirmations are great, but I got to tell you, the R of the acronym OR stands for reflective listening. Can you say back to them what you heard them say in your words? If they tell you, hey, I was able to cook at home 2 nights, but we ate out the other 5. So how do you find a way to brag on that? Well, you shared that with me. How do you reflect back to them accurately what you think they're really telling you? And this becomes something where you literally need to practice this. And that's one of the things we'll do in the CU event. I mean, We want to practice on each other, and the more experiential, the better.
Yeah, one of the things I've experimented with is simply asking them if my interpretation of what they told me. I'm like, so what I'm hearing you say is that you're unhappy with your weight, you
I
know.
love it.
And
Yeah.
then I just leave it open, and people are like, yes, and then they'll elaborate on it a little bit more, um, and then you just go from there. But and I'd be interested on your thoughts on this. So I think obviously those folks are ambivalent, and I think and I'm going to have somebody else on the show who's going to talk a little bit about mental health too, because I do think it's important. But I think there's two conversations to be had here, and I know you probably didn't even plan on this one, but the first one is with the client. You know, the client who comes in, and there's probably two buckets of people there. Those people who are those pre-contemplation people, and then those are the people who become ambivalent, or just they become indifferent, right? Because they're
Yeah.
not seeing what they want. And then there's two different conversations you have there. But then the third one, I think, is on the business owner side of the house, because I don't think enough people are talking about the mental health of the entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of people are pitching the idea that this is all great, and not to say that it's devastating, you know, like it's definitely a super rewarding job, but I don't think people are being accurate about the stresses that come along with small business ownership. Like, you know, it's not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that. Like, not everybody crutches it. Like, most people probably struggle financially, and that has incredible wear on people over time. And then that in turn reflects on you as a person, inhibits your ability to have these conversations with other people. Because if I'm dealing with things internally, it's incredibly difficult for me to have empathy for other people.
You have hit the nail on the head. And I believe that people who are just checking boxes off they kind of get exposed pretty quickly the more people that they deal with. So when you're raw and frazzled, and you have, as we say in the counseling profession, you have compassion fatigue, you know,
Yeah.
all you got to do is ask my wife, and we could maybe ask yours, you know, how is it that you can be so nice and helpful to all those clients, but you come home and blah, blah, blah. So, you know what? I emptied the tank, man. And there are people who are emptying the tank every day with good intentions. Yes, this is the conversation we need to be having with our coaches in our coaches meetings and all this kind of stuff. Guys, are you guys remembering to ask open-ended questions? You know, that's my vision, would be, are we using these, you know, state of the science, you know, I got to be careful, evidence-based, as far as I know, valid and reliable practices, best practices that we use in the behavioral science in our coaching and with each other.
So what would be your advice? So like, what was something that like a business owner like me could do? So, you know, like I have no problem saying this. Like, my wife and I have been to counseling on numerous occasions for different things. You know, we went to counseling after our daughter was born, because that was a really traumatic experience. We've been to counseling for just marital issues where, you know, nothing crazy, but like just inability to communicate on things, or stress, and then having to unpack that and understand that I'm not actually mad at you. I'm just stressed, and I'm not really sure how to deal with that, because I don't understand how you're feeling. But what you mentioned there is one I wouldn't say we have it like really frequently, but it's not. We've had the conversation about, you know, you have to be able to do both things, right? You have to be able to show care with their clients, but you also have to be able, not necessarily empty the tank there, so that you can go home and care about your wife and your kids, because, you know, forget the business. Like, at the end of the day, that's all I really got. Like, I got my wife and my kids, like, hopefully. So what, like, for somebody who's on the verge of that burnout, because we did another episode on burnout, like, are there any like tactics or tips or tricks you can do as far as like resetting yourself before you go home to your wife, so that you don't like dump all over them because you're frustrated about some crap that happened at the box?
Absolutely. First, let me say that we are a oral, consumptive, fixated, oriented society. When we're stressed, we put things in. We chew on things, we eat things, we take things orally. And the number one way to deal with not just stress, but what we would call distress, which is
Mm-hmm.
stress, anxiety, irrational thinking, irrational expectations. We also use the same thing. Our mouth, we talk. That's how you deal with. That's the natural release valve of pressure for us. And so, what I'm going to suggest to you is, of course, there's a lot of little tactics and strategies. I mean, watch Greg Amundsen talk about box breathing. That's helpful. But
Mm-hmm.
you guys already know that you need to exercise and eat right. That helps too. But you're still experiencing stress and anxiety. So we're saying, talk about it, and talk about it with someone who exhibits accurate empathy with you, and not going to tell you to just suck it up and pull your bootstraps up and be glad. People would crawl on broken glass to be in your position. Suck it up. That has caused as much harm as anything.
Yeah.
That is the just say no of the addiction treatment world. What we did is we found out, I'll try to hurry on this.
No, you're good.
There was a smoke cessation study that was done. It was the state-of-the-art, world-class, evidence-based approach to helping people quit smoking. And we offered it for free. It was at the University of Maryland. I say we, the field of counseling and psychology. They offered it for free. Of the people that were offered, 10% took it free. 10% took the opportunity. So, motivation is an issue. Some people think people lack motivation because they won't quit something. They won't change something. We see it in the trans-theoretical model of change. The stages are pre-contemplation, then contemplation, but then the next one is planning. Most of the time, it's not a motivation issue, it's a planning issue. You don't lack motivation, you lack planning.
Yeah, they don't know what to do, right? Like that's the biggest thing, and that's why most people that again fall in this chronic disease bucket, or we'll just broadly call it the population that we are trying to reach out to, the people that are not fitness enthusiasts, like literally everybody else. I have found that I don't think it's lack of motivation. Yes, there are some people that lack motivation and they will never do anything, and like those people are out. But the rest of them are just at a loss. Like they literally have no plan. They don't know what how to allocate their time, their money, their resources, the value of exercise, like how to prioritize exercise, how to set their freaking alarm clock. Like it's a behavior thing, which is what we talk about. It's like fitness, money, and nutrition are all the same. They're all behavior based. Like if you can wrap your brain around like what are my behaviors, and then figure out how to combat my own behaviors or combat your behaviors, then I think you can start to have a conversation with people. And that's something that I found super valuable with myself, is like whether it be money or nutrition or fitness or something or whatever. It's just like, okay, what is my current behavior? How is that sabotaging me? And then what can I start to do to create that plan that you talked about to combat those behaviors? Because I'm not going to change it at first. I mean, you tell me, you're the professional, but like in my experience, I'm never going to change it. I just have to battle with it for a while until I can begin to change it.
Hey, planning is so crucial in so many aspects of our lives. Of course, this is not anything new, but I can tell you from a behavioral science standpoint and from my own experience, when I have people come in who are referred by the criminal justice system, which I do a lot of work with legally coerced people, right? So they're not the happiest of campers when they come in and I say, hey man, I'm going to recommend a 13-week program, and you're going to have to ask off early from work, and I'm going to put you on a color code drug testing process, and somebody's going to observe you peeing and all of this kind of stuff. Would you say they're pre-contemplative, contemplative? I don't know until I do an assessment with them and find out and ask them open-ended questions. And I bring this up to say that I can immediately start planning with a person who is even showing signs of ambivalence or even opposition and defiance. I start planning with them as early as possible. So I would say to your earlier question that I probably ran a couple of rabbits with, if I'm a gym owner who is frazzled and raw or wore out from doing back-to-back classes and trying to run the gym and have uncomfortable conversations and have accurate empathy, what do you do for them? What can they do? They can sit down at the kitchen table with a low heart rate, okay? Tell all the people that they love that for this 1 hour, understand I'm okay, but you won't be able to reach me. 1 hour. I'm going to invest 1 hour, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan out how I can keep losing my freaking mind at work. And so they do. You showed it the other day, class planning. Well, that's how we got to plan our day. That's how we plan our business, with a plan. And the plan includes talking to someone who is unbiased. And look, I know this is self-promoting, but I believe in the power of sitting with an objective, skilled professional who's not going to judge you, at least not outwardly. They're going to be professional. Look, I've got a coach, I've got a mentor, somebody who I go to. Every coach needs a coach, man, as
Yeah.
you know.
It's something I like my wife and I have worked on, where we kind of talk these things out, and then I recognize. So obviously I do this podcast, and if you're kind of in my inner circle, like most people take some, like I can seem argumentative, meaning like I'm quick to have an argument, but for people that know me, it's not because I like to be argumentative for the sake of being argumentative. I genuinely enjoy the playing of tennis with ideas. It's just like, I'm going to say something, and then I really enjoy you coming back with a counter offer, and then we go back there with, in many instances, with no desire to win, simply to just play the game of batting ideas and conversation back. But that drives my wife insane. Like, she doesn't want to do that. So we defined it as, I like what is described as mental jousting, like, because I just find it stimulating. So when I get into that state, like, I now recognize it, and I'll have to stop myself and I say, hey, listen, I'm not jousting with you right now. I genuinely need to know this information.
Yes.
Right? And it really heads off some things where she would just like spin off and like, kick me in the shin or something like that. So I think if you can figure out, like, from a coaching standpoint, if you know that like you're strung up or you're strung out by the end of the day, it's like, recognize that. Like, I think simply recognizing that, and maybe sitting in your car for 5 minutes before you go home, or maybe isolating yourself 10 to 15 minutes before you do a sit down with a client who is coming in here that might be challenging to work with. Like, get your mind right. Like, that works. But I did have another question in here, and so we're talking a lot about using these tactics and doing this, but I know there's somebody who's listening to this and is just like kind of throwing their hands up and saying, hey, listen, where does being direct fall in here? Like, at what point just be like, listen, you're overweight, or you eat like crap, or you skip training days. Like, I don't know how else to tell you this, and no amount of me asking you open-ended questions is going to get us where we need to be. Like, at some point, I feel like I need to just tell you that you suck. Where does that fall in from a coaching standpoint?
Absolutely. Such a fair question. Unnecessary. Let me say this. My own personal opinion is there's a time and a place for being assertive in this way. Not aggressive, but assertive. Right? So instead of saying you're obese, that's why you can't link, 5 chest to bar. You're throwing your belt down and storming out 4 classes up. What's wrong with saying, man, what's going on? Open-ended question. Dude, you were totally intense in that workout. It looked like you're having a great workout. And then shut up and listen to them. And then if they show you that they're in action mode, pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action. If they tell you by how they answer the open-ended question the things you need to hear to discern whether they're in this or that state, then you know, hey, they just opened the door for me. Look, you're going to lose 30 pounds, man. Would you like to work on a way to do that?
Yeah, I think that's super important because I think some people, and I've been there as my, I just get frustrated and I'm like, you are not, you're just delusional about whatever it is. And I've been delusional myself. I'm not perfect by any means, but like there's certain times when I wish somebody would have come in direct and said, hey, listen, this isn't the time for me to be huggy on you. Like I'm going to give you the tough love that you need. Now, granted, like I respond well to that, but not everybody does. Right. So I've been in the instance where I project my own responses onto other people and it's not worked, so sometimes you do have to be a little bit more soft with people about how you address them. But no, I do think a tactic that I've learned to use, and I don't remember where I learned this. I think I talk about Chick-fil-A a lot just because I think they do a lot of things well. And one of our members here is operates two restaurants, but their thing is never assume what kind of day the person at the window is having. And I think if we operate under the guise of like, hey, this person could very well be having a terrible day, I think inherently we just approach things differently. Like I'm not going to assume that you're ready to joke around today, or stuff like that. So I think it's like you kind of like test the waters real quick and then, okay, you're good or you're not. And then I ask, hey, like, are you okay? Like, what's up? And that's something that I've learned, probably only gotten good at within the last couple of years, is when I see somebody's off, that's the first thing I ask them, like, are you all right? Like, is there something going on? You want to sit down and talk about it? And I mean, dude, you would be shocked at some of the shit that people have told me. Like this is interesting because like coaches are not counselors, but we're kind of counselors.
Hey, let me say this. I want to piggyback off of that. Do you know Dr. Kevin Elko? Are you familiar with him?
I'm not.
Yeah, he's like Nick Saban, mental performance guru guy that he goes to. He comes and speaks to goes and speaks to sports teams and
Okay.
big corporations and stuff. But anyway, Dr. Elko said something. He and I were trained by a guy named Dr. Ed Jacobs in cognitive behavioral psychology. But anyway, Dr. Elko said, if every person you met, if you just assumed and presupposed on every single person you meet after our conversation that every one of them's hurting, they're hurting, experiencing emotional pain, what would your body language be like? Like, how do you look at your friend when they say their parent just passed away? And so how would you talk, or how much would you listen? How much self-control would you have? How would you approach that? He said, so the funny thing is that you would be right. It's actually true that all people are struggling with something. This is not a pessimistic point of view. This is a highly emotionally intelligent way, I think, not just me, but in general for people to view human beings. Everybody's got something going on. I love your approach where you test the water. And here's one thing that a coach actually taught me, a football coach years ago. He said, look, the first day he actually brought the parents out, just like middle school football. But he did the smartest thing, I think, still to this day, and I use this the first time I meet clients. How would you like for me to handle you not following my directions? How would you like me to approach? In essence, how do you like to be coached?
Yeah.
Now, it could change, but that in a way what you do if I can get on your tail without having to beat around the bush a lot.
Yeah. And that's what kind of athlete I was, which means I had a lot of work to do in the coaching realm, because I was just, listen, give me both barrels. Like you can yell at me all day, like hold me underwater forever. Like it doesn't matter. Like that's generally how I responded well. One thing that I've learned to do, and this is going to sound incredibly mundane and just not important at all, but a very simple question that if you just ask people when they come in the gym will probably give you more information than than you could possibly imagine. Is I just give them a high five and say, how you feeling? And their response to that based on their body language, their facial expressions, and the words that they use gives me a pretty accurate idea of what I'm dealing with that day. How you feeling? And they'll be like, they'll do that one. Or they're like, man, I feel great. I've had a good week. And I'm like, okay, cool. Or, they're just like, I don't know. It's been a rough week. Like they will tell you. And then I can follow up with some other questions after that. But it gives me an idea of like, is this person going to shit the bed in the workout today? And if they do, now what am I going to do about it? Like where normally I would get on this person, but today I'm going to cut them some slack and walk over and just say, hey, just take it easy. Just move today. I know you're having a rough day. Don't care what the time says. Just finish it and we'll be done, But I think that simple question of how you feeling has been like super beneficial for me and the responses are not lengthy by any means, but the body language, the facial expressions, and the words they use generally give me, I would tell you, like 80 to 90% accuracy of like what I'm going to be dealing with that day in the class. And I don't think we ask enough questions. We just assume everybody's there and ready to throw down. And some people are there just to, literally get a break from the craziness and disaster that is their life.
You guys say the best hour of their day. Absolutely. I love the question. How are you feeling is an open-ended question. It's awesome.
And it goes a lot of different ways, right? So it's like, how are you feeling physically? How are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling psychologically? And most people's answer is going to go to whichever one of those three that they're currently dealing with. So like just by default, they're going to give you the most important piece of information that they're currently feeling at that point. And I think it's a really, really important one. And so I just ask people that all the time, just how you feeling? And it is like dead every single time, dead on. And just like, okay, all right, I'm just going to leave you alone today. Or if you're ready to go, I'm going to be all over you today. So I think that's where it comes in, is like this ability to be a coach and meet people where they're at. Yeah. I don't think you can just meet people where they're at. I think you have to know where they're at first, and then you can work on meeting them where they're at. So this is very cool. Okay, so the CEU, for everybody that missed that, there's a course on there for your level 2, level 3, or actually for your level 3, and then eventually for your level 4, which I believe is supposed to be online in 2020, but different subject. OARS, the art and science of uncomfortable conversation. And OARS, the acronym stands for open-ended questions, affirmation, reflective listening. And then what was the S for, Matt?
The S is summarizing. This is really where we agree what it is we're agreeing on as a partnership, not a dictatorship. Even though they know you're in a position of authority, the more we can be in a kind of relationship with them that is a cohort more than a dictator. But the summary is really taking everything that you heard from them, everything you're experiencing, and then having that plan we talked about. Where do we go from here? So what, now what, as we say.
And then the other piece of that was, so you have your folks that are pre-contemplation, you have your contemplation, your action folks, and then your planning, right? So the vast majority of people that we deal with are probably in contemplation or action, actually even more so probably in action for a CrossFit gym. So where we need to develop some skill sets is that kind of pre-contemplation, contemplation lane. And then this is where we can start to use that OARS. So in order to meet people where they're at so that we can get them on board, because these are the people that need us the most, right? Like the people that are in your gym, like you're just giving them more of what they already have, and at some point we have to decide like, hey, there's a really broad population of people out there that are dealing with the tsunami of chronic disease or ambivalence, like you said. And how do we start to communicate with those people? And it starts with a plan, no different than your lesson plan. If you're trying to bring in more and more people, like what is your plan for talking to people who are, we'll just call it what it is, unlikely to purchase your service?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Fern, I know we're probably getting close to wrapping up, but I got to throw this out here if I've got to
go ahead.
In the addiction treatment world, and I would say in around the late 80s, early 90s, when I started getting into this field, we really, as a treatment community, we were still doing what's called confrontation. We still saw that as a therapeutic technique. We would confront people in group therapy about relapse, about acting in ways that are going to lead to relapse, about acting in ways that create triggers that will lead to relapse, and all that stuff. And we also viewed people who didn't follow our directions as people who are not ready. And we would judge them, and we would say, now, this hasn't been that long ago. Have you ever heard this? The person just hasn't hit rock bottom yet.
Yep.
This was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
A person doesn't have to lose everything to be prepared, to be motivated to change. And so what we learned is finding out where they are relative to their perception of their problem. Where are they? Are they already in contemplation and they're just waiting for the person, the right person, to have accurate empathy with them, to say, hey man, I can see where you're weighing the pros and cons here, and the devil you know is better than the one you don't know, so not making a decision is safe to you, right? And
Yeah.
so we could just say, hey, we'll wait on them, and we waited around till jail, institutionalization, or death, which is the three outcomes of people who continue at least abusing substances. So I don't want us to be that way when this tsunami of ambivalence walks through our doors, as we continue to promote treating and helping this new population. Thank you so much for letting me do this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun. And I think it is important, because I think as we start to, cast that larger net for people, I do think what we're going to find is that a lot of us are woefully ill-equipped to start to deal with that population. But that doesn't mean we can't develop those skills. And a lot of what we're dealing with as we start to wade into those waters is very similar, if not the exact same, as addiction, because most of these people are dealing with what's just food addiction. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's the same, like we still have to approach this from a clinical standpoint, not as clinicians, but from a strategic standpoint, because that stuff has been proven to work, and there's some really cool stuff out there. So we talked about the couple of books. So there was motivational interviewing, but is there anything else that you would recommend for like coaches, gym owners that they can really deep dive on this stuff so that they can start to sharpen the axe on like how to start to have these conversations?
Yeah. What I'm going to recommend to you guys is to do your own study on motivational interviewing, anything by Dr. Miller or Rollinick, Rollinick. So Miller and Rollinick are the authorities on motivational interviewing as a counseling style to help people deal with things like ambivalence or being stuck in one of these stages of change.
Yeah.
And then Prochaska, I believe is the name of the guy at the University of Maryland, who did a lot of the work on the trans-theoretical model of change. I think it'll make you much more competent. You're already competent in so much that's helping, millions of folks. If you're a CrossFit coach around the world, you're already doing amazing things. I think this is just another tool for me, because, as they say, if all you ever see are nails, all you ever use is a hammer. I view all of this stuff as a mental health issue, all of it. I see that, I part of the treatment plan for some of my clients is you need to find a CrossFit box. And I do that. It's not the only answer, but it is one of the tools.
And I think that's key, is that it's not the only answer, and we just can't fix things with exercise. Like there's a lot more that goes into that. Yes, that exercise can help with depression, and it can be an avenue for some people, but it's not going to solve people's problems. Like, coming in and doing burpees and thrusters is not the answer to, mental health. It's definitely a tool. It's one of many tools we have in our tool bag in order to address that, but it's not the only thing. The other thing I had in here, I found is coactive coaching. So if anybody's interested in coactive coaching, it falls in that Stephen Covey kind of like genre of books, and some really good stuff in there. But it's very long. It's very similar to motivational interviewing. It's a lot of open-ended questions about like trying to get people to give you information with regard to like what they're feeling, stuff like that. So, dude, this has been fun. I think this is super valuable for the community, particularly as we start to really try to serve the underserved population, which is primarily like the chronically ill, because I think these skill sets are what we're all going to have to develop, but these are things that are useful with just your everyday relationships as well. So it's not like this is just for, clients. So this is cool. Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate it. You guys. Are you familiar with Viktor Frankl?
Yep. Yeah. With Man's Search for Meaning. Yep.
Yeah. In that book, he says, and I just, this helps me, as you said earlier, you got to find a way to get your mind right. Viktor Frankl, who I guess we could safely say experienced some trauma and some discomfort in his life.
That would be an understatement. Yeah.
Dr. Frankl says somewhere in there, and I'm paraphrasing, but I highly recommend the book to everyone.
It's a short read too. It's not a big book.
Short read. Somewhere in there, buried like a treasure. He says success must not be pursued; it must ensue as an unintended byproduct of one's dedication to someone other than themselves. And this is really selfless in many ways. We do leave our best days, our best moments in the counseling office, and in my experience on the gym floor, and yours, maybe all across the country for you as you train people. Some of our best moments are used in places other than with our family and friends and loved ones, but remembering that that's what this is about. We chose it, right?
Yeah.
This is what we chose. And maybe it chose us.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool. And I think Cassidy brought it up in a previous episode, which is one way to measure that is to kind of constantly keep yourself on the hook and be like, are people better for having been in my presence? And that's a pretty heavy burden to bear if you think about it. But that's what you signed up for if you do this. So Matt, I appreciate this, man. This was fun for me. So I can't thank you enough for this. If you guys have questions for Matt, he owns it's Matt Miller Coaching, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Matt Miller Coaching. But if you have other questions about, some of the more nerdy stuff that we were talking about, please hit us up. We can hand you off to Matt, but look him up. And we will get you guys in touch. But thank you again, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, one more time, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and send us any feedback you have to @besthouroftheirday on Instagram and besthouroftheirday@gmail.com if you want to shoot us an email. We appreciate you. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.